Good morning, everybody. On this date, August 13, in 1961, perhaps the most potent symbol of the Cold War was begun, and that would be the Berlin Wall, separating the Soviet zone of Berlin from the Allied zones. As World War II in Europe came to its final months in the spring of 1945, a big question was who would get to Berlin first? Would it be the Russian army or would it be the Americans and the Brits? And the Russians got there first. Here's a photo of Red Army soldiers on the top of the Reichstag. Look how bombed out Berlin is. So we got in there a couple weeks later, and it was soon after the war ended that Germany was divided into 4 zones: Russian, American, British, and French. And Berlin, which was in the Russian zone, was also divided into zones. And here's a map of that from 1945. And you could get from one zone to another, but it was clear that the city was going to be divided among the great powers, just like the country had been. The next year, Winston Churchill was in Fulton, Missouri, visiting Harry Truman, and he gave a speech where he brought up the phrase, "An iron curtain has fallen over Europe." So this became one of the great symbols of the Cold War. I remember hearing about people on the other side of the Iron Curtain. Well, the Marshall Plan was economic aid to war-torn Europe offered to the Russians. They didn't take it. Big for Germany, big for France, big for Britain, because we realized we needed to get Europe on its feet again. And Stalin responded by putting a blockade on Berlin, but he hadn't blockaded the air corridors. So after a while, the Berlin airlift got organized. Airplanes came into Berlin on 3 different corridors, round-the-clock flights for over a year, and it kept Berlin from starving. So Stalin lifted the blockade, but the next year, in 1949, it all became sort of official, that you had East Germany, East Berlin, West Germany, West Berlin. So as one walked around Berlin in those early days after the war, this is what you saw. Which sector you were in, the rubble of the war, all kinds of rebuilding. And this is sort of an eerie photograph, isn't it? I mean, this is one of the great cities on the planet, yet there's no traffic. But you can see the sign, "You are leaving the American sector," in various languages. So in the years after World War II, West Germany really got going. Partly Marshall Plan, partly other things. But the West German economy really started to boom, but not the East German. And this aerial photo shows West Berlin in the background. That area in the middle is Potsdamer Platz, kind of the key part of Berlin. In the foreground, you see East Berlin, still bombed out, still damaged. And the Russians put up barbed wire separating the Russian zone from the other zones. They didn't want people to leave, but no barbed wire in Berlin itself. So here's the subway map from the late 40s, early 50s, and you could still move freely around the city. And one result was the brain drain. People would come to East Berlin and then get to West Berlin and then go to West Germany. And by the time of our story, millions of people had left East Germany. Well, in 1961, Khrushchev on the left and Kennedy on the right met in Vienna, and Kennedy kind of implied that, yeah, it's your zone and you can do what you want. This is quite controversial. And that's the context for our event. August 13, 1961, barbed wire went up, separating the Russian zone from the other zones. And it was 2 days after that that Hans Schumann, East German policeman, jumped over the wire to get away from East Berlin. Pretty famous photograph. But eventually it was clear that the barbed wire was going to go through the whole city. In the background you see the Brandenburg Gate, which is in the heart of Berlin, historic Berlin. And it wasn't long after that that concrete blocks went up, and you wonder what people on either side of this were thinking at the time. But eventually the Berlin Wall would become part of the fabric of the Cold War.